Please welcome to the stage APAP's President and CEO, Lisa Richards-Toney.
Wow, we made it, y'all. We did 3 years worth of work in 4 days. It's so good to see everyone. Good morning and welcome. What we have experienced the last several days of this conference is a testament that we collectively are moving the performing arts ecosystem in the right direction. Congratulations. You know what we have accomplished, and so do I. I am so pleased with how the conference has helped us to steady our momentum. Today, and during the days ahead, I encourage us all to relish in all that we have achieved to get here. Commit to extending the joy that we have experienced, and when you take it home, take it to your offices, to your rehearsal studios, to your theaters, and commit to advancing the promise that our future holds. Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank our conference committee. Yes. For all their energy. They had great energy, people. You gotta have good energy and stamina to do 3 years of work in 1 year, you know. Intention and care that you brought to this conference. I so appreciate you. I invite all of the conference committee members to please stand. Thank you. Again, let's thank our sponsors and our funders. Yes. I'd next like to thank the real people of today, okay? You know who they are. They're my staff. Yes. I said, where'd they go? They were sitting here. Oh, there they are. They're in the front row where they belong. Team, when I call your name, please stand, face the audience, and take your bow. Krista Bradley. J.G. Decker. Neo Narnor Madison. Sue Noseworthy. Annie Peterson. Katrina Robinson. Willie Santiago. Keisha Shorter. Lauren Taylor. Jenny Thomas. And so with me, I think that's just 11. 11 people, y'all, put on this event. But I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge our 4 consultants, and they are mighty. Here they go. Victoria A. Brash. Suzanne Callahan. They're still working. Glenda Noel Ney. And Sarah Torrey. I would also like to extend thanks to the APAP NYC volunteers and to our conference production team. I will call them by name. Derek Allen and the Buoyant Partners team. Bill Carlton. Claire Caulfield. Mickey Dorsey. Liz Simak and Alyssa Steriati from GES. Craig Horness. Jennifer Ingle. Adam and Christy Kissick. Caitlin Sopanor Davis. Mike Schotten. Deirdre Staples. Mary Jane Baker and Jeff Turner from Swapcard. Stephen Schwartz. AJ Wilhelm. Nate Zeisler. Let's give them all a round of applause. And thank you to my board. They're a great group of colleagues, and they're your colleagues too, both incoming and outgoing members, for your tireless and dedicated service to APAP and to this field. Can all of you please stand? Thank you. I'd also like to thank several of our board alumni. Well, all of them actually, not several of them. Several of them are here, but I'll thank all of them. They continue to lead and love this organization. In coming together to celebrate our return to APAP, it is only fitting that we also remember those within our community who we have lost. Since our online conference last year, those who are now ancestors. We salute these colleagues and friends for enriching our performing arts field and that of our own lives. I invite you to take a moment of silence to remember them as their names are shown on screen. Grief is a process, and somehow our mournful tears eventually fade, and we are welcomed with cherished memories and a feeling or a sense, a knowing that we are being covered, protected, watched over by those ancestors. This knowing is what helps us to get over and carry on. In affirming that legacy, something transformational also happens within us. We are once fearless in laying bare the trials and tribulations of our past. It's a first step in a collective reset, a clearing that gives us the emotional space to fully embrace the possibilities of our future. And our future is bright, and they would be so proud. It is now my great honor to introduce a woman who is making such future incredibly bright. I'd like to introduce my colleague and new friend, Dr. Maria Rosario Jackson, Chair of the National Endowment for the Arts. Welcome, Maria.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Lisa, for that warm introduction and welcome. I'm Maria Rosario Jackson. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a woman with short curly hair. I'm wearing a gray top and a black sweater. And good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to join you all on the last day of what seems to have been a fantastic conference. I'm grateful to Lisa, to APAP staff and board, to the conference co-chairs, Christopher Morgan, Andrea Cuevas, Diana Tan, and Todd Wetzel. Thank you for inviting me to share some thoughts with you today. As a former APAP board member, many moons ago, I know very well how important this organization is nationally and abroad. You help set the bar, you help set the industry standards. So to all at APAP, thank you for your unwavering leadership. To everyone in attendance, thank you for what you do to support the live performing arts every day. And thank you for doing it in a time, especially in times of hardship and uncertainty. It's heartening to see so many of you here in person, here with the intention of connecting and doing business, but also with the intention of learning from each other as we work towards that brighter, more equitable future where all people can live artful lives and thrive. That's the future that I think Lisa was talking about in her remarks. It's been an honor and a privilege to have been appointed by President Biden to serve as chair of the NEA. I've been in my position roughly a year now, and I've used that time to visit many communities around the country to learn firsthand about issues, opportunities, and challenges you're facing. And one of the most important things that I've learned is that coming back from the pandemic is an opportunity to reimagine how we work, how we can improve on past practices to make opportunities for arts participation more relevant, accessible, and equitable across this country. That relevance and equitable access is core to our existence as a sector, but it's also core to our prospects as a nation. And what I know for sure is that none of the things that we've said that we aspire to as a nation of opportunity, none of them are possible or durable without the arts and related work. And you all know this, but I'll say it. The arts help us make sense of the world, offer us different ways of thinking, feeling, and being. They're a source of inspiration and innovation. They help us protect and advance our humanity and the humanity of our neighbors. And the arts are critically important to our well-being as individuals, as communities, and as a country. I'm eager to share with you the programmatic priorities that I'm pursuing at the NEA, but before delving into that, I think it's important that I share with you some principles that have guided my work from different perches for almost 3 decades now. And these principles undergird my work currently. So first, the ability for all people to make sense of the world on their own terms, to tell their stories, and to be creatively expressive. That's a key element of justice, equity, and a healthy existence. And it's core to the American ethos that we profess. Second, our concept of art and cultural engagement has to be expansive. It includes, very importantly, professional production for the consumption of art, but it can't only be limited to that. It must also include making, doing, teaching, learning, so many verbs. It has to include art as part of our daily lived experience. Third, we have to recognize that art process can be as important as, or in some cases even more important than art product. And sometimes that's hard to fathom. But I'm happy that at the NEA, we just added creative process to our definition of artistic excellence. That's in our newly published grant guidelines, and it's creating more of an emphasis on the experience of making art. Fourth, artists, culture bearers, designers, they have many critically important relationships with publics. And I say publics intentionally. It includes the concept of audiences, but it's broader than that because we engage with artists in nuanced ways beyond just the traditional notion of consuming as audience. By extension, we have to understand the varied ways that artists have crafted their careers. And often these are many ways, but they're beyond the narrow paths that have been paved. So artists are creating new ways of working, constructing their careers, and they're working outside of their lane, as they should be. Last, the arts are intrinsically important, full stop. At the same time, they're critical elements of other things, community dynamics, needs, aspirations, including those deeply connected to building healthy communities where all people can thrive. This sensibility is evident in the principles, these principles that I just shared with you, but I'm also informed by our collective experience over the last 3 years, a pandemic, heightened racial reckoning, social and political polarization, global instability, environmental crises. So the entire creative sector has been seriously impacted and is still working towards recovery. It has been and continues to be an extraordinary time that's full of trials. But as I've visited with local communities and met with arts organizations, I've found that there's also evidence of strength and flexibility and even a sense of possibility. In so many ways, in both our personal and professional lives, there's been a need to question what we've often held as orthodoxy, what we thought was not negotiable. So at our best, our creativity, imagination, generosity, and nimbleness have allowed us to respond, adapt, step up. And during this time when many of us have the opportunity, obligation, or mandate to reset, we have to be intentional about not just uncritically snapping back to an idealized notion of what was pre-pandemic. This isn't easy sometimes. As we do our work, it's important to take stock and figure out what have we learned, what has been affirmed, what's been challenged, or even debunked. I want you to know that from my perch as chair of the Arts Endowment, I see the challenges and hardships that have hit this industry. We've all been grappling with how the pandemic will impact audiences in the long term, As I've heard from many of you, the cumulative effect of inflation and the slow return of audiences has made it challenging to forecast ticket sales. The past few years have also highlighted the fragility and vulnerability of artists, as well as agents and managers, often functioning as small business owners. Our arts ecosystems, much like natural ecosystems, are shifting and demanding new ways of working, new ways of gauging success and progress. While some of our new ways of working may have been born out of hardship, I'm heartened by the fact that new and first-time audience members have attended events virtually and that available technology makes it possible to keep these audiences engaged. Many of the projects we're seeing in grant applications are working to meet audiences where they live, and there's evidence of thinking differently about the possible connections between virtual participation and live engagement. Organizations like Performing Arts Houston are using this moment to commission works from Houston-based artists, finding relevance and celebrating and nurturing the incredible talent within their local community. The Celebrity Series of Boston is bringing their programming outside of traditional venues, commissioning and presenting arts programming for children and adults in community centers and places of worship. Contratiempo Dance, the Pioneer Winter Collective, and the Kinetic Light have expanded our traditional notion of dance as they work towards a more inclusive and equitable dance community. And of course, many of you are doing the work to reimagine your programming to ensure that historically underrepresented artists, including artists of color, indigenous artists, and artists with disabilities, have opportunities to make deep connections with publics of all ages. Artists themselves are also seizing this time to advance different ways of working for themselves and for the broader field, some building on changes that they've been pushing for decades. Musicians like Daniel Bernard Romaine and Michael Mwenzo not only infuse their art with the values of justice and equity, but have lent their expertise to presenters in support of their evolution as well. This summons to learn from the last 3 years, advance work that's often been at the margins, and think outside of the box or even dream big. This is also something that we're embracing at the Arts Endowment. So grounded in the principles I shared with you and mindful of the last 3 years and inspired by the thinking of this time as one that maybe is best met through a culture of possibility. As I've traveled and spoken nationally and internationally, an idea that I've been advancing is a focus on the importance of living artful lives. Artful lives is an inclusive concept that contains everything from the quotidian, sometimes non-professional, but deeply meaningful practices and expressions inherent in our diverse everyday lived experiences, to the making, presentation, and dissemination of professional art forms in all disciplines and traditions, work that can be sublime and transcendent. The ability for all people to live artful lives is a key element of equity, justice, and opportunity. So in addition to the artful lives concept, I've also been talking about how unleashing the full power of art requires cultural practices in the arts to not exist in isolation or in a bubble. We have to find and infuse creativity and art in everything we do. So hence the notion of arts in all. If art is considered to be a luxury or something that isn't integral to our lives, we lose one of the best ways we have to express our fears, share our joys, learn from our past, communicate with each other, and imagine and create the future that we aspire to. And frankly, if we don't realize that the arts make possible what I think of as preconditions for the things we say we want as a benevolent society, we're stuck. So this idea of arts in all requires animating work at the intersections of arts and other fields, fields such as education, community and economic development, climate, and more, including very important work in the areas of health and well-being. Delivering the full power of the arts requires building what I call an arts-infused civic infrastructure. Art defined expansively, woven into the relationships and mechanisms we rely on to care for each other. And this is manifest in our built environment, so the physical spaces we inhabit, as well as the practices of the institutions that we rely on for advancement. These ideas are impacting how the NEA is and will be showing up. We'll continue to be a funder, which is how we're known primarily, but we also emphasize our role as a national resource for creating and bolstering healthy arts ecosystems that contribute to building communities where all people can thrive, where people can lead artful lives, and where the important work happening at the intersection of arts and other fields of policy and practice is strengthened and advanced. In terms of the specifics of what serving as a national resource can mean for the field, the intent is for the NEA to access all of the assets that it has at its disposal. So this includes grant money and financial resources, but it also includes other things like leveraging our relationships with other federal agencies, such as the Department of Education, Health and Human Services, Housing and Urban Development, Transportation, identifying ways in which the arts can contribute in these realms, and also unlocking new opportunities in the arts for arts organizations and artists. We have access to the pulpit and bullhorn of the executive branch and the imprimatur of the federal government. We have access to the infrastructure of state arts organizations, regional arts organizations, and local arts agencies, as well as their networks. We have the view and analysis that we can render from a national perspective, and we have the ability to commission and conduct research about the roles of the arts in our society, including focusing on health, well-being, and other areas, and our ability to connect and convene communities of learning and practice, our ability to catalyze and amplify, to be a partner with you, really. So additional changes are to come, including changes that help us better support communities that have been historically underrepresented and underserved, as well as we deal with a growing volume of funding applications to the NEA, in part as a result of the American Rescue Plan and related efforts, which had really broad reach. It's important to note that as we lean into this identity of a national resource, we're not starting from scratch. Examples of precedents to build from include the work with our arts education team and its collective impact focus, the work of our Town program through its field building efforts in collaboration with philanthropy and other organizations, the NEA Interagency Task Force on Human Development, and several initiatives at the intersection of arts, health, and well-being, among others. There's several things that bode well for moving in this direction, specifically our strategic plan and recent executive orders. In 2002, we did a new strategic plan and adopted a plan that specifically calls out objectives in response to what we heard from stakeholders, including our commitment to continue and expand our focus on the intersection of arts and well-being. So, for example, the creative sector spoke clearly about the importance of international exchange. Our continued collaboration with the Department of State and cooperative agreement with Mid-Atlantic Arts Foundation enable ongoing support for cultural cross-learning. And there'll be other programs that encourage that international focus. In our strategic plan, our support for civic infrastructure also includes skill building and leadership development for individuals tasked with reimagining the future of the sector, artists and arts professionals who are representative of the diversity of our nation's communities and not limited by old boundaries. Our plan calls for reframing our many arts-related initiatives and investments into a cogent body of work that more readily helps people understand the depth and breadth of what the endowment does and helps us to support the field in ways that are more impactful and strategic. So in addition to the strategic plan, there's some executive orders that are also creating an environment for new and enhanced ways of working. For example, at the beginning of the Biden-Harris administration, President Biden issued an all-of-government executive order focusing on racial equity and attention to more equitable outcomes for historically marginalized communities. And this has allowed us to bolster our efforts to serve the historically underserved. Also, most recently, the President issued another all-of-government executive order recognizing the contributions of arts and humanities, our cultural vitality, and not only in economic terms, but broadly. He talked about the importance of the arts in relation to health and well-being of the nation and the future of democracy itself. The executive order focuses on advancing arts, humanities, museums, and libraries as strategic elements in a wide range of federal aims, and directs other federal agencies to enter into partnerships with the NEA, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and the Institute for Museum and Library Services. The executive order also reestablishes the President's Committee on Arts and Humanities, which is meant to enhance the effectiveness of federal support for the arts, the humanities, and museum and library services. It's an exciting time. So just know that the NEA is here to walk alongside with you as we adapt and hopefully dream big together. I know we can't do our work without open channels of communication with you and the benefit of your experience, your perspectives, and your reach. So our ability to learn together, share insights, adjust, and coordinate, that's essential. And I believe that to my core. There's some things that we should continue to do together as we advance in this journey, some questions we need to keep asking. How do we not just snap back to business as usual when we can do better? And keeping in mind our next generation and informed by our examined experience, what do we envision the future of the arts sector to look like 10 to 15 years from now? And what do we have to set in motion now? And what are signs that we're moving in the right direction? And again, the ways that we gauge success and progress may look different from how we've gauged success and progress in the past. Can we be open enough to embrace that and imagine what that might look like? I'm really excited about seizing what opportunities are available to us in a complicated, but I think truly generative time. And I thank you for what you do again, and I thank you for listening.
Please welcome to the stage Renee Williams-Niles.
Wow, that was powerful. Yes, I think, here's my mic, there it is. Before we start conversation, I do want to quickly say thank you to our ASL interpreter, Caitlin Britton. Thank you, Caitlin. And this is, I am just so incredibly thrilled to be able to do this. I've had the pleasure of knowing you for quite some time, but to be able to refer to you as Dr. Jackson in front of our friends and colleagues means a great deal. So thank you again, Maria, for being back with us with your APAP family. Thank you for that. So I wanted to ask at least a couple of maybe the atypical questions, and then we've got a couple of questions that we've received from some of our attendees. So I want to first start by at least going to the beginning, so to speak, for you. So in October 2021, that is when all of us, the world, learned that President Biden intended to nominate you as our NEA chair. And then that was confirmed on December 18, 2021. And you began serving officially in January 2022. So this is basically your 1-year anniversary in the position. And I know you served on the council as an Obama appointee in the past, but I'm so curious, what was that first form of communication? I know a phone call from Jen, FBI knocking on your door, I don't know. But can you talk a little bit about how you initially found out that you were being considered and the process from your perspective?
Sure. And it's so good to be with you, Renee. So I got a call in spring of 2021. These years merge. It's kind of hard to keep track. Spring of 2021, it was actually from a colleague who's here, who's our White House liaison, Jen Chang. Way, Jen.
I love that she got to make the call.
So Jen called me out of the blue and had this thing for me to consider. She said, would I consider taking this position? Well, would I consider entertaining the position?
Right.
And I was taken aback, and I asked, can I think about it? And she said, yes, of course, go think about it. And what does this mean? And she told me a little bit about what was required, and then I had to think about it. And I had to think about, what does it mean to resign from everything?
Yeah. Yes, because you do so much all at one time.
Yeah.
I mean, rightfully so. So it wasn't just resigning from one position.
Yeah, so I mean, the way I've shaped my career is that I've often worked from different perches simultaneously, knowing that you can do some things from higher ed, you could do some things from philanthropy, you can do some things through board service on big organizations, on small organizations, you can do something from local government. So I've had these different fingers in different pies, let's say, and was quite happy doing that. So what did it mean to resign from everything and focus on one thing? Within federal government, what did it mean to take a pay cut?
Yes.
What did it mean for me to be inspected, right? Because it's a very public inspection. People look under your fingernails and your spouse's fingernails, and what does it mean to do that? And we had to do that for the Obama administration too, but this is another level. So what does it mean to do that? And why would I want to do it? And I really had to think long and hard about that. And I really do feel that we are in a time, this is during the pandemic, and I felt like we're in a time where there is a real odd window of opportunity to do something and have it be impactful, have it matter, have it be durable. And I wanted to participate in that. So I said yes.
Well, and thank you for saying yes. And I think it resonates that you did not make this decision lightly. And something that you've talked about earlier, your guiding principles, and touched on a little bit. I mean, just to be able to talk about the work that you've done in the philanthropic community within several different communities and organizations, also as a professor, as you had mentioned, and your work on strategic planning, social justice, equity, policy research, and you were doing so much of this work actually before many were even aware. And so I know having a lasting positive impact is absolutely essential for you. And I'm wondering if you can talk about how this extraordinary experience has prepared you for this role. And then I'm also curious, as you've been in this chair position for a year now, have there been any surprises?
Wow, that's a good question. So in terms of how previous experience prepared me for this role, yeah, because I have worked from different perches throughout my careers, I know that there are things that you can do from some places that you can't do from others. And I know that at our best, we don't operate in a bubble. So understanding what is it that can happen from the perch of federal government, and how does it connect to the work that people are doing from other vantage points. I think having worked in many other vantage points, being able to connect the dots is something that I'm excited about, right? Because at our best, we're not working in isolation. We understand that we're part of something that is connected, that can be synergistic, that can make a much bigger difference when we understand how we can leverage each other's positions and realms of impact, let's say. So I think there's something there about not working in isolation that I bring into this. In terms of surprises, oh, lots of surprises.
Are there any you can share?
Well, I mean, there are things that you can do from federal government that you can't do otherwise, and there are some things you can't do. So, for example, we can't advocate. That's not part of what we can do legally. When you're sitting in different places, you can do that work. That's not something I can do right now. There are things that I think have to do, in terms of, not surprises, but just realizations that become more and more real. You know, the idea of what is possible is something that I've always been optimistic about. You kind of have to be if you've done this line of work. And thinking about what do we really have access to change or make progress on? And understanding, you know, what is statute, what's policy, what's unexamined practice? And what do you need to actually do to make changes that are important, right? So, I mean, there are several things that, for example, my staff and team staff is here. Please say hello, NEA staff. I'm so, it's Katrina, Jenny, and Brandon.
They've been here for the past several days as well.
Yes.
So thank you.
And I'm so grateful to them for everything that they do. But they, you know, they've heard me ask some tough questions, which is the origin story of how we work. Trying to figure out what, you know, what is statute, what is policy, which is something we made up, right?
Somebody did.
Somebody made up. And what is unexamined practice? What do we just keep doing because that's the way we've always done it, and we're quote unquote good at it, right? So when you start asking those origin stories about, okay, well, why do we do this way? Sometimes the answers are surprising. And sometimes you actually have more real estate to play with, more latitude than you thought. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important, whether you're in federal government or wherever you are, to unsettle the orthodoxy and ask the question, why are we doing this the way we're doing this? And do we still need to keep doing it this way? And I think the not surprise exactly, but the recognition that those questions sometimes haven't been asked in a long time is something that I see often, right? And not just within our agency. I think beyond. And especially now, as over the last 3 years, we had to unsettle our orthodoxies, and we know that there are different ways of working. And we suspended some things that were requirements that, and it worked, right?
It was still effective.
Right, so what can we learn from the last 3 years at least that allow us to understand how we might be more effective going forward?
Well, thank you. And I appreciate also the reminder that all of us need to continue to ask those same questions as well. So I have one more question, and then we're going to, I'm going to switch to a few questions that we received in advance from attendees. But my question is, many of us frequently, perhaps more recently, over the last few years, talk about what brings us joy and what keeps us centered. And I'm wondering for you, especially in this role, in this position, what is bringing you joy and what is keeping you centered?
I think what brings me joy in this role is knowing that there are things we can do from the perch of the National Endowment for the Arts that actually can make a difference in helping us be wholly human again. And that brings me joy, to know that we can contribute to that. What was the other part of the question? What brings you joy?
Kind of keeping you centered, yes.
That our work is supposed to land in the homes and families of regular people, right? So that keeps me centered, that ultimately that's what I signed up to do, right? That when I walk out of my house and look around my neighborhood, my neighbors are supposed to be feeling the impact of what I'm doing in Washington, right? So that keeps me grounded. But for all of us that work in the arts, the fact that we're contributing to humans being whole, right? And I really do believe, and some of you know I come at this, I've been working in the arts for decades, but I come at this out of an urban planning and community development route. And I know that the things that we say we want to accomplish as a country of opportunity, we can't do that without the arts. And we keep thinking about and often have talked about the arts as economic drivers and drivers of global competitiveness, and that's important. I don't want to poo-poo that in any way. I think that's important. It's important to continue to lift it up. But what we haven't talked about enough are other roles of the arts in keeping us healthy, in helping us to develop the empathy and understanding that we need to actually make good and deliver on the promise of this country that we keep holding up. And we can't do it without the arts. We're stuck if we don't figure out how to integrate that into other ways of working.
So we received a good number of questions, but for the sake of time, I've kind of pulled some of them together. And forgive me for those that submitted questions. I am going to kind of paraphrase, and like I said, bring this in. But what was interesting among the majority of the questions we received, they all kind of focused around equal access or equity. So clearly you are among your people. So this first question, and you've talked about that the NEA is, and your leadership in particular, asking these questions around policy and process. Sonia Clark from Art Park and Company asked a question, and so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how might the NEA continue to adapt its cultural practices that might deviate certainly from the standard Western world requirements. An example was signed paper documents or use of payroll for some indigenous nations. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more in terms of the continued questioning, or are there possible changes?
I think the questioning is really healthy. And you know, one of the things that we've started to do, particularly with indigenous communities, are tribal consultations. And tribal consultations are intended to help us understand how to show up in ways that can be truly supportive. And you know, some of that has to do with understanding different worldviews, understanding historic circumstances, and trying to take that information and help us grapple with how we need to pivot in order to meet mission. I think it's important for people to continue to transparently tell us what's working and what's not working, and to tell your leaders what's working and what's not working, so that we can be responsive. I think that that's really important. We hear a lot about several things. The labor required to do grants, and whether it's worth it if it's a really small grant. We hear that, and we know that, and we're thinking about what would make it worth it. Do we really need as much labor as is required? Are there ways of changing that? Those are things that we're interrogating now. So I think there's that. I think there's also a commitment, and staff does a great job of this, of staying proximate to the work, right? And not being so distant and far away from it that we can't see what difference adjustments can make, right? So there's that kind of continuous proximity and interrogation and call, really, to help us understand what changes could be made. Some changes, you know, you trace them back and it's statute. That's law, right? It doesn't change easily. It doesn't mean that it can't change at all. Some changes you trace back in their internal policy. Somebody at the NEA made that up at some point, right? That you might be able to change a little more readily. And again, sometimes it's unexamined practice. It's just, if you've been doing it, somebody said that's how you do it. And nobody said why. Nobody asked why, you know. So again, continuing to question our own practices is something that we're committed to, especially now.
So one more question, and for the sake of time, I'm going to ask this one. There were a few questions in relationship to artists and support of artists, particularly from Duke Dang of Works in Process, as well as Laura Colby. So I'm wondering if you could talk about current support of individual artists, as well as what might be coming in the future.
So currently the NEA directly supports individual artists, mostly through its honorific programs. So through Jazz Masters, through the Heritage Fellowships. There are also some programs in the literature field that go to individuals. Money that comes from the NEA to state arts agencies in many states, not all, but many states, that money can be available to artists. So they're
From the state agencies that
from the state arts agencies.
From the NEA.
Mm-hmm. So most of you probably know 40% of the budget of the NEA goes to state arts agencies. So there's support in that way. I mean, one of the things that I'm really interested in is you heard me talk about pivoting to an identity that is more around national resource, not only grant maker. How do we use some of the other assets that we have available to us to create opportunities for artists, right, and to support artists? So, for example, one of the things that happened this year was a collaboration with the General Services Administration, and this is for visual artists. But the General Services Administration, that's interesting because it may not be exclusively visual artists, but General Services Administration is a very interesting federal agency, but they are sort of the landlords. They are the people who are charged with taking care of facilities within federal government. And there's renovation and new facilities that are created over time. Anyway, there's a Percent for Arts program within that. And especially now where there's so much investment in infrastructure, there's several billions of dollars that are available that have that Percent for Artists or Percent for Art requirement. Working with them, I think over the next couple of years, we're able to help unlock $17 million more for artist commissions. Great. So working with them to do that and make sure that those opportunities are advertised and socialized in ways where artists from all communities have access to them is part of our charge with them. But that's why those relationships with other agencies are so important. It doesn't increase our bottom line in terms of resources, but we have potentially a really important role in unlocking these opportunities. Resources. Yeah.
And that could be long-term as well. Wow. Well, thank you again for this conversation. I want to say thank you to all of you, certainly for joining us today, for being here at this conference. Dr. Jackson, thank you on behalf of the entire arts ecosystem. I love it. This is only after 1 year. So, thank you, everyone. Now, I think this is when you know that you are among those that want to just continue to carry this torch with you. I know one of the things I was going to ask you is what do you need from all of us? So you have ways in order to continue to reach out to us, let us know how we can support the work of you and your team. So please do that. And now if I can ask Lisa Richards-Toney to return to the stage.
Wow. Dr. Jackson, I just have to say, you are our ancestors' wildest dreams. This is kind of a thing, you know? The courage to truly be courageous, the courage to question is not easy, but you're doing it. The courage to seek change and not go back to something that, I'm gonna use it, you just made it up. But the courage to really charge a way forward that we can all be proud of, because we are in forward motion. We're not a stagnant group of people. We're not a stagnant culture. We've got to have a way forward and people who are daring to do that. So thank you to Dr. Jackson for being here, for the work that you're doing for the endowment, and for the work that you will continue to do on behalf of all of us, your neighbors. We do feel it, and we appreciate it. And I'd like to thank this lady on my right, the Queen, Renee Williams-Niles, Chair of the APAP Board of Directors, and one of my very, very, very good friends. Thank you, Renee. Renee always asks the questions, and I tell her that. We meet on Zoom every Tuesday. And I say, oh, did you just ask me that? Oh my God, I gotta think about that. She's good. She's good. Renee, your expertise, your curiosity to bring out the best in this conversation is evident, and we thank you. Well, folks, we did it! It's done! Conference 2023 APAP NYC. Was it a hit? Yes. Thank you. I bid you all safe travel, and that you are inspired by what has happened here, and that you will go forward with that level of curiosity, the greatness that you possess. Own it, be joyful by it, and know that your work is not in vain. And we are stronger together. That's right. Thank you.